I traveled 500 miles to give my daughter a birthday surprise. I planned everything down to the smallest detail, the cake, the gifts, the party. But when I arrived in her city, I found something I never could have imagined. My daughter was sitting on the sidewalk in dirty and torn clothes, holding a piece of cardboard and begging for spare change. The $2,000 that I sent religiously every single month had disappeared, and the truth behind it forced me to fight the hardest battle of my life. But before we continue, check if you are already subscribed to the channel and let us know in the comments, where are you watching this video from? We love knowing how far our stories reach. When the bus pulled into Union Station in downtown Chicago, it was 6 in the morning on a freezing cold Saturday in January. I had traveled all night from Des Moines, Iowa, squeezed into an uncomfortable seat, but I did not care. My excitement was much stronger than my exhaustion. It had been 3 years since I had seen my daughter Chloe in person. 3 long years since she married Julian and moved to the big city to start a new life. She always called me. That much is true. Every week we had our chats. I would ask her how she was doing, if she needed anything, if her husband's real estate business was doing well. Chloe always replied that everything was excellent, telling me not to worry. But a mother just knows. You know? During our last few calls, I noticed something different in her voice. A hesitation, an exhaustion she was desperately trying to hide. I planned this trip 2 months ago, when I realized her birthday would fall on a Saturday. It was going to be the perfect surprise. I bought my ticket without telling a soul, got her presents ready, and even ordered a cake from the best bakery I could find online in the city. I just wanted to see her face light up with pure happiness when she saw me at her front door. I grabbed a taxi outside the station. The driver was a friendly older guy who wouldn't stop chatting about the freezing weather and the morning traffic. I gave him the address Chloe had given me when she first moved. 347 Astor Street, in the Gold Coast. A very exclusive, high-end neighborhood, she had proudly told me back then. Julian had gotten them an apartment there through his wealthy family. Traffic was light at that hour. I stared out the window, watching the city wake up. Coffee shops opening their doors, people walking their dogs. The sky still a dull winter gray. My heart was racing with anticipation. When we were just a few blocks away from the address, I asked the driver to pull over at a grocery store. I wanted to grab a few things to make a special birthday breakfast for my daughter. I ran inside. I picked out some warm, fresh bagels, a fruit platter, artisanal cheeses, deli ham, and freshly squeezed orange juice. I kept picturing the scene in my head. I would knock on the door. Chloe would open it still in her pajamas, her eyes wide with shock, followed by the tightest hug. I got back into the taxi with my bags. We were only 2 blocks away. That was when I saw it. At the traffic light, waiting to cross the street, there was a woman sitting on the frozen sidewalk. She was far too thin, her hair completely matted, wearing clothes that looked like they had not been washed in weeks. She was holding a piece of cardboard with something scribbled on it, and there was a little boy sitting right beside her, bundled up in a filthy, worn-out blanket. My heart literally stopped beating because I recognized that face. Even though it was covered in dirt, even though she looked utterly defeated, even though she looked destroyed by life on the streets, I knew that face. It was my daughter. I screamed at the driver to stop the car. He slammed on the brakes, startled. I threw a $50 bill onto the front seat, grabbed my bags, and stumbled out of the cab. My grocery bags ripped, the oranges rolling down the icy sidewalk, but I did not care. I sprinted toward her. Chloe looked up when my shadow fell over her cardboard sign. For a split second, she just stared at me, completely uncomprehending. Then her eyes widened in absolute shock, and she whispered my name like I was a ghost. "Mom," she gasped. I dropped to my knees right there on the filthy concrete and held her face in my hands. Her skin was ice cold. She was shivering violently. "Honey, what happened to you?" My voice was shaking uncontrollably. "What happened to the $2,000 I send you every single month?" Chloe broke down sobbing. It was not a normal cry. It was the wail of someone who had held on to far too much pain for far too long. The little boy beside her, who I now realized was about 4 years old, clung to her jacket, terrified. "Mom," she could barely speak through her tears. "Julian and his family, they threw me out. They took absolutely everything." I felt the entire world spinning around me. People were rushing past us on the sidewalk, some giving us pitying looks, others looking at us with outright disgust. An older woman kneeling on the street, hugging a homeless person and a child. What a pathetic scene we must have made. But none of that mattered to me. What do you mean they took everything? My voice came out much louder than I intended. Where is your apartment, your things? Your money? Not here, Mom, please. Chloe looked around with genuine terror in her eyes. They might see us. They might take Leo away. That was when I got a good look at the little boy. Dark hair, just like Chloe's, massive, terrified eyes. My grandson, a grandson I never even knew existed. You have a son? I whispered in sheer disbelief. She nodded, wiping her dirty face with trembling hands. Leo is 4 years old. I didn't tell you because they wouldn't let me. Julian said you would just want to interfere, that you would ruin everything. I felt a blinding rage rising in my chest like hot lava. But before I exploded right there on the sidewalk, I took a deep breath. I needed to be practical. I needed to get my daughter and my grandson out of the freezing cold. We are leaving right now, I said, standing up and gently pulling her by the arm. Right now. But Mom, I can't. Do not argue with me, Chloe. I used the exact same tone I used when she was a little girl throwing a tantrum. Get up right now. Pick up Leo. We are going to a hotel. She hesitated, looking frantically side to side like a cornered animal. But she finally stood up, picking up the boy. He must have weighed next to nothing because he was far too small for his age, clearly malnourished. I hailed another taxi. The driver scrunched up his nose when he saw Chloe and Leo, visibly uncomfortable with their appearance. I handed him a $50 bill right through the window and told him to take us to the nicest hotel he knew in the immediate area. During the ride, I held Chloe's hand. It was incredibly rough, covered in calluses that had no business being there. My daughter had always had the softest hands, the kind of hands that put on expensive lotion every single night. These were the hands of someone who had done hard labor, someone who had suffered immensely. Leo was entirely too quiet on her lap, just staring out the window with those giant eyes. A 4-year-old boy should be loud, curious, and bursting with a million questions. This child seemed to have learned that absolute silence meant survival. We arrived at a modest but very clean hotel downtown. The front desk clerk looked at me suspiciously when he saw Chloe, but my cash spoke much louder. I booked a double room and paid for a full week up front. The second we stepped into the room, I locked the deadbolt. Chloe just stood in the middle of the room, looking completely lost. Leo was clinging tightly to her legs. First, you two are taking a hot shower, I said, walking into the bathroom and turning on the water, adjusting the temperature until it was perfect. Then we are going to eat a massive meal, and then you are going to tell me everything. Absolutely everything. I helped Chloe peel off those filthy, foul-smelling clothes. When I saw her bare body, I had to physically bite my own tongue to keep from screaming. She was skin and bones. There were dark purple bruises all up and down her arms. Some were fading to a sickly yellow, while others were fresh and dark. Fingerprint bruises. The unmistakable marks of violence. Who did this to you? My voice was low and dangerous. Later, Mom, please, she whimpered, stepping into the steaming shower, still shivering. While she washed up, I took care of Leo. The little boy looked at me with pure terror, but he did not resist when I started helping him out of his dirty clothes. He was also terribly thin, his skin caked with dirt from days without bathing. I put him in the shower with Chloe. I threw every single piece of their old clothing straight into the trash can. Then I called the front desk and begged them to send someone to buy some clean basic clothes, giving them approximate sizes. I paid triple the cost just to ensure they hurried. When Chloe stepped out of the bathroom wrapped in thick white towels, holding a squeaky clean Leo, she looked like a completely different person. She was still painfully thin, still looking utterly defeated, but at least she was clean. The clothes arrived. I dressed Leo first. A tiny pair of sweatpants, a soft t-shirt, and a warm hoodie. He let me do everything without making a single sound. Far too quiet to be a normal child. Then I helped Chloe get dressed into her new clothes. I ordered room service, club sandwiches, hot chicken soup, fresh fruit, and apple juice. When the cart arrived, Leo devoured his food as if he had not eaten a real meal in days. He probably hadn't. Chloe ate very slowly, silent tears streaming down her face between every bite. I waited for her to finish. I waited for her tears to dry. I waited until she was truly ready. Then I sat down on the edge of the bed right next to her and said, "Now tell me everything, starting from the very beginning." Chloe took several deep breaths before she finally started to speak. Leo had fallen fast asleep in her arms, finally relaxed after the hot bath and the warm food. She tucked him gently into the other bed, pulling the thick comforter up to his chin, and then she sat back down next to me. "I met Julian 6 years ago, remember?" she began, her voice barely a whisper. "Back then I was working as a receptionist at that law firm in Des Moines. He came into town for a big real estate meeting. He was so handsome, so polite, so incredibly attentive. He started sending me expensive flowers, taking me out to fancy dinners. I remembered him perfectly. I remembered how Chloe would come home glowing, talking non-stop about this wonderful man she had met. A highly successful real estate developer from Chicago, she used to say. Old money family, owns half the properties in the city. After 6 months of dating, he proposed. Chloe wiped a fresh tear from her cheek. It all happened so fast, but I was so blindly in love, and he swore he loved me, that he wanted to build an incredible life with me in the city, where his family ran their empire. I remember the wedding, I said softly. It was tiny. Just us and his immediate family. Yeah, they insisted on keeping it that way. They claimed it was more intimate, more special. She let out a hollow, humorless laugh. I was such a total idiot. I didn't realize they just wanted to isolate me from day one. Chloe explained that when she officially moved to Chicago, Julian took her to see their new apartment. It was absolutely gorgeous, a luxury high-rise right in the Gold Coast. But there was one little detail she only found out about much later. The apartment was entirely in her mother-in-law's name, Patricia. Julian claimed it was just temporary, that it was much easier for tax purposes, and that he would transfer the deed to their names very soon. Chloe shook her head sadly. I believed him. I always believed every single word he said. The first few months honestly felt like a fairy tale. Julian worked closely with his father at the family's massive real estate development firm. Julian told Chloe she didn't ever need to work. She could just stay home, decorate the apartment, and be a devoted, loving wife. She happily agreed, thrilled with her luxurious new life. But then I got pregnant. Her voice cracked. It wasn't planned at all. When I told Julian, he flew into an absolute rage. He screamed that the timing was terrible, that I was going to ruin all of his big plans. But his family reacted completely differently. Patricia was absolutely glowing at the prospect of having a grandson. His father, Arthur, was thrilled too. Suddenly, Chloe found herself surrounded by constant attention. But it was a very strange, suffocating, possessive kind of attention. They started controlling every aspect of her life. What she ate, where she went, who she talked to. Chloe wrapped her arms around her own knees. Patricia always claimed it was for the baby's own good. She said she knew best because she had successfully raised 3 kids. Chloe was forbidden from flying back to Des Moines to visit me during her pregnancy. There was always a convenient excuse. The doctor didn't recommend flying. It was far too dangerous for the baby. It was much better to wait until after the delivery. Even my phone calls to you started being heavily monitored. Patricia would sit right next to me on the couch whenever I called you, Chloe explained. She would make sharp hand gestures, telling me not to mention certain things, claiming she didn't want to worry you, and I obeyed her because I was so terrified of causing any drama, of losing Julian. Leo was born prematurely, tiny and incredibly fragile. He spent 2 agonizing weeks in the neonatal intensive care unit. During that exact period, Chloe discovered something that shattered her entire reality. I was resting in my hospital room when I overheard a conversation between Julian and his mother. Her whole body began to tremble. They were standing out in the hallway, assuming I was fast asleep. Patricia told him that they finally had the heir they desperately needed, that I had successfully fulfilled my only purpose. She said that once Leo was a little bit older, they could easily get rid of me and keep the boy. I felt the blood freeze in my veins. They planned this from the very beginning? I think so, Mom. They desperately wanted a grandson to carry on the family name, but they never wanted a middle-class daughter-in-law like me anywhere near their precious family. Chloe wiped away more tears. After they let us bring Leo home, my life turned into an absolute living hell. Patricia practically lived in our apartment, micromanaging exactly how I took care of my own baby. She constantly told me I was doing everything completely wrong, that my sheer incompetence was going to get the baby killed. As time slowly dragged on, Chloe was systematically broken down. Julian, who used to be so incredibly loving, became ice-cold and distant. He would spend days away on business, come home late at night smelling like alcohol, and would barely even look at her. I tried to talk to him, to beg him for some privacy, telling him his mother was being way too invasive. Chloe gently touched the yellowing bruises on her arms. That was the very first time he hit me. He screamed that I was an ungrateful gold digger, that his family had given me the world, and I had absolutely no right to complain. The horrific violence escalated quickly. It started with aggressive shoves, then hard slaps across the face, then brutal punches. He always made sure to hit her in places her clothes would cover. Always when no one else was around to witness it. And Patricia knew, Mom. She saw the bruises with her own eyes and completely pretended not to notice. When Leo turned 2, I started receiving those monthly deposits from you, Mom. Chloe looked at me with deep sorrow. $2,000 every single month. You told me it was so I could have my own emergency fund, my own independence, but I never once had access to a single penny of that money. What do you mean? I asked, completely alarmed. Julian controlled every single account. My bank account was a joint account in his name too. He automatically transferred every dollar you sent straight into his real estate firm's corporate account. He always told me it was an investment for our family's future. She let out a bitter, heartbreaking laugh. I was so incredibly stupid that I actually believed him. Over the last 2 years, her situation went from awful to unbearable. Julian had taken a mistress. Chloe eventually found out. It was a young woman who worked at his real estate office. When she finally confronted her husband about the affair, he beat her so severely that she couldn't get out of bed for 3 straight days. Patricia actually came over to take care of Leo during those 3 days, Chloe recounted. And that is when she finally told me the ugly truth. She told me Julian was planning to marry the new girl the second he got rid of me. She bragged that they already had the entire plan laid out. They were going to legally accuse me of being an unfit, negligent mother, of having severe psychiatric issues, of trying to abandon my own child. They were going to demand full custody of Leo and throw me out onto the street with absolutely nothing. Why didn't you call me? Why didn't you just ask for help? My voice cracked with suppressed emotion. Because they monitored everything. Mom, my cell phone, my personal emails, absolutely everything. Chloe was sobbing uncontrollably now. And they threatened to hurt you if I ever breathed a word to anyone. Julian told me he knew exactly where you lived, that it would be incredibly easy to make a fatal accident look completely natural for an older woman living alone. I felt physically sick to my stomach. What kind of absolute monsters were these people? 3 months ago, they finally executed their plan. Chloe wiped her face with the back of her hands. I came home from taking Leo to the neighborhood park, and the locks on the apartment had been completely changed. There was a private security guard standing at the door, telling me I was permanently banned from the premises. Patricia suddenly appeared holding a legal restraining order, loudly claiming I was violently unstable, that I had explicitly threatened to harm Leo. That is an insane lie, I yelled. I know it is, Mom, but they had piles of fabricated evidence, forged text messages I never wrote, paid witnesses who swore under oath they saw me acting violently toward my son. It was all a massive lie. Everything was bought and paid for or entirely fabricated. Chloe choked on a sob. They took Leo away from me, Mom. They literally ripped my screaming child straight out of my arms. The emergency custody hearing was a blur. The high-priced attorney for the Almazan family, Julian's powerful family, presented fake psychiatric evaluations, sworn statements from bribed neighbors claiming Chloe severely neglected the boy, even digitally altered photographs. The judge only granted me strictly supervised visits once a week at a family center, Chloe explained. But when I showed up for my very first visit, Patricia was sitting right there, and Leo, He barely even recognized me. They had brainwashed him so intensely during those months away from me that he was just totally confused and terrified. With zero money, nowhere to live, and no identification because her purse and documents were locked inside the apartment, Chloe was thrown onto the brutal streets of Chicago. She desperately tried to get a bed at women's shelters, but without a valid ID, she was turned away everywhere. She slept on freezing park benches, under highway overpasses, anywhere that offered a sliver of shelter from the wind. 1 month ago, I finally managed to grab Leo. She looked over at her sleeping boy. They were leaving a pediatric appointment. The expensive nanny looked away at her phone for a split second, and I just grabbed him and ran for our lives. I know it is legally wrong. I know they consider it kidnapping. But he is my son, Mom. He is my baby. Since that day, Chloe had been living completely off the grid, hiding with Leo in the shadows of the city. During the day, she begged for food money. At night, she constantly moved to different abandoned spots so she wouldn't be tracked down. She lived in absolute terror that the wealthy Almazan family would find them and drag Leo away forever. I couldn't call you because I didn't even have a phone. I couldn't risk reaching out to you because I was terrified they were still intercepting your calls somehow. Chloe looked at me with totally devastated eyes. Mom, I am so deeply sorry. I am so sorry for all of this. I pulled my daughter into my arms and let her sob into my shoulder. I cried right along with her, our shared pain mingling there in that cheap hotel room. When we finally pulled apart, I wiped my face, looked her dead in the eye, and said with a voice made of pure steel, "It is over. This ends right now. They are not taking my grandson. They are not going to destroy my daughter. We are going to fight, Chloe, and we are going to win." The very next morning, a Sunday, I left Chloe and Leo resting safely in the hotel room and went out to handle exactly what needed to be handled. My first stop was a large department store where I bought them both decent warm clothing, winter boots, toiletries, and everything else they desperately needed. I spent over $500, but I did not care. Next, I went to a pharmacy and bought multivitamins, heavy-duty ointment for Chloe's bruises, and bandages. I also bought an armful of toys for Leo. That little boy desperately needed to remember how to be a kid. I marched back to the hotel loaded down with shopping bags. Chloe was awake, sitting cross-legged on the bed, holding Leo tightly while he watched cartoons on the television. When she saw the mountain of bags, her eyes instantly welled up with tears again. Mom, you really didn't need to spend so much money. Zip it and accept it. I started unpacking the clothes. You are my daughter, and this is my grandson. I am going to take care of you too, exactly like I should have done from the very beginning. Leo was absolutely mesmerized by the toys. It was the very first time I had seen that little boy crack a smile. A tiny, incredibly shy smile, but a real smile nonetheless. My heart swelled with a fierce mixture of pure joy and absolute rage. Joy at seeing my grandson happy for a fleeting moment. Rage for every horrible thing they had put him through. We spent that entire Sunday huddled together in that room. I ordered massive amounts of food, we watched funny movies, and we played on the floor with Leo. For the first time in what must have been months, Chloe actually relaxed a little. I physically saw the heavy tension leaving her shoulders, watching her genuinely laugh at her son's silly antics. But Monday morning arrived, and I needed to take serious action. I woke up at the crack of dawn, left Chloe a stack of cash to order a huge room service breakfast, and headed out into the city. I had spent hours researching on my phone the night before and found the name of a ruthless, highly successful family law attorney, Victoria Sterling. She was famous in the city for taking on impossible cases and destroying the opposition. Her massive firm was located in a sleek glass skyscraper right on Michigan Avenue. The polished receptionist greeted me with a tight, professional smile. I need to speak with Attorney Sterling immediately. It is a life or death emergency. Does ma'am have a scheduled appointment? No, but I will sit in this chair for as long as it takes. I marched over and sat down in the waiting area. 2 grueling hours later, the receptionist finally called my name. Attorney Sterling was a sharp-looking woman in her late 50s, with silver hair pulled back into a tight bun, thick designer glasses, and a piercing gaze that felt like it was scanning my soul. You have exactly 15 minutes, she said, pointing to the leather chair across from her massive oak desk. What can I do for you? I told her absolutely everything. Every single detail of Chloe's nightmare, from the whirlwind wedding to finding her begging on a freezing sidewalk. I told her about the vicious domestic violence, the fabricated psychiatric accusations, and exactly how the wealthy Almazan family had weaponized the legal system to steal everything from my daughter. Attorney Sterling listened in absolute, calculated silence, only occasionally jotting down a sharp note on her legal pad. When I finally finished, she leaned back in her expensive chair and studied me for a very long moment. Your daughter took the child without a judge's authorization. She took back her own flesh and blood that was stolen from her with forged documents. I understand that, but in the eyes of the law, that is a felony parental abduction. Attorney Sterling let out a heavy sigh. That severely complicates our strategy. So you are refusing to help us? I did not say that. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the desk. This case is a total mess, but it is not impossible. The Almazan family has committed multiple serious felonies here. Aggravated domestic battery, massive financial fraud involving the funds you transferred, and perjury by falsifying evidence. The major hurdle is decisively proving all of that. And exactly how do we do that? First, your daughter needs to turn herself in to the authorities, with me present, in a highly controlled environment, before the police issue an active warrant and hunt her down. Attorney Sterling clicked her expensive pen. Second, we need an avalanche of hard evidence, medical records of the sustained abuse, rock-solid witness testimonies, and financial paper trails proving the accusations against her are total fabrications. How much is your retainer? My upfront retainer is $15,000, plus all ongoing litigation expenses. $15,000. That was a huge chunk of my entire retirement savings. But I stared at this sharp-suited woman and saw pure predatory determination in her eyes. I saw a shark who actually cared about winning for the right side. Can you start right this second? I asked, pulling my checkbook out of my purse. A tiny, dangerous smile appeared on Attorney Sterling's face. I like your attitude. Yes, we start right now. I spent the entire rest of the morning in her luxurious office, handing over every piece of information I had. Names, dates, addresses, bank records. Attorney Sterling immediately started making calls, assembling our war council. I am going to need a trusted forensic doctor to thoroughly examine your daughter today, she commanded. We need high-resolution photographs of every single bruise that is still visible. We need a legally binding medical report. I will handle setting that up. And we are going to need a highly skilled private investigator to completely rip apart the Almazan family's finances, to find the exact paper trail of your stolen money. How much does that cost? I know the best guy in the city. He charges $5,000 for a comprehensive deep dive investigation. $5,000 more. Dear God, this was getting astronomically expensive. But then I pictured Leo's face lighting up when he saw those cheap plastic toys. I pictured Chloe sleeping on the freezing concrete. It was worth every single penny I possessed. Hire him immediately. I got back to the hotel in the early afternoon. Chloe was pacing the room like a caged tiger, while Leo played quietly on the carpet. Mom, where have you been? I was terrified. I was out fixing this mess. I sat on the edge of the bed and took both of her shaking hands in mine. I hired a bulldog of an attorney, the absolute best in Chicago. She is going to get us out of this, but Mom, someone like that must cost an absolute fortune. You let me worry about the bank accounts. You just focus on getting your strength back for the absolute war we are about to fight. I explained Attorney Sterling's master plan. Chloe's face drained of all color when she heard she had to turn herself in to the police. Are they going to throw me in a jail cell? Are they going to rip Leo away from me again? Attorney Sterling is going to negotiate the terms. You are going to walk in with your lawyer, and you are going to tell the absolute truth. With the fresh medical evidence of the horrific domestic violence and the massive financial fraud, she firmly believes she can keep you out of a cell and get emergency custody reversed. But what if she fails? What if they lock me up and send Leo right back to that monster? You don't need to trust the system, but you need to trust me, and trust the lawyer. We are going to win this war. That very evening, Attorney Sterling showed up at our hotel room with a highly respected forensic medical examiner. He examined Chloe with meticulous care. He took bright flash photographs of every single fading bruise, every tiny scar, every piece of physical evidence of the brutal torture she had endured. Chloe wept silently through the entire exam, the trauma of every punch rushing back to her. The doctor also gently examined Leo. The little boy was severely underweight, showing obvious signs of malnutrition from living on the streets for a month, but there were absolutely no marks of physical violence. Chloe had never laid a single finger on her precious boy. "This is phenomenal for us," Attorney Sterling stated bluntly after the doctor packed his bags and left. "We now have indisputable physical proof of the savage violence against you, and proof that Leo was unharmed while in your exclusive care despite the horrific living conditions. What happens now? Now I go make a deal. I have an emergency meeting with the Assistant District Attorney tomorrow morning to present our preliminary bombshells. If everything goes right, I will ensure you are heard by a judge before anyone even thinks about handcuffs." I barely slept a wink that night. I just lay there in the dark, staring at Chloe and Leo sleeping soundly, wrapped in each other's arms in the bed next to mine. My daughter and my grandson, who I came so incredibly close to losing forever, who were almost entirely destroyed by those evil, soulless people. I made a silent, blood oath right there in the dark hotel room. I did not care how much money it cost. I did not care how long it took. I was going to utterly destroy the Almazan family exactly like they tried to destroy mine. They were going to pay in blood for every single tear Chloe shed, for every moment of pure terror Leo felt. Tuesday morning, Attorney Sterling's number lit up my phone. I secured an emergency hearing with the ADA for this afternoon. Bring your daughter. The Cook County Courthouse was a massive, intimidating concrete fortress that made me feel incredibly small as we walked through the metal detectors. Chloe was vibrating with terror beside me, gripping my hand so tightly her knuckles were white. We had left Leo back at the hotel with a highly vetted professional nanny that Attorney Sterling had hired, someone she trusted with her life to keep him safe while we went to war. Attorney Sterling was waiting for us in the busy lobby, looking like armor in her sharp gray suit. "Remember exactly what we rehearsed," she instructed Chloe sharply. "Be brutally honest. Let them see your genuine pain, but do not become hysterical. Let our mountain of evidence do the heavy lifting." We took the elevator up to the prosecutor's floor. The assistant district attorney was a sharp, focused man in his early 40s named Nicholas Hayes. He had a stern, uncompromising face, but his eyes looked fair. Attorney Sterling presented our case like a maestro conducting a symphony. She slammed down the glossy photos of the horrific bruising, the official forensic medical report, and a thick stack of bank statements showing the $2,000 I deposited every single month that Chloe never touched. She also presented subpoenaed phone logs, text records, and emails proving Chloe was kept completely isolated and monitored. My client was the victim of systemic, savage, domestic violence and massive financial exploitation by her ex-husband and his wealthy family, Attorney Sterling stated with absolute conviction. The legal accusations against her claiming severe negligence and mental instability are complete fabrications, entirely manufactured to legally justify stealing her child and her financial assets. Ada Hayes studied the thick files in absolute silence for several agonizing minutes. Then he looked directly at Chloe. "Mrs. Almazan, do you fully understand that by taking your son without a judge's legal authorization, you committed a very serious felony?" "I know." Chloe's voice shook, but she held his gaze. "But he is my baby. They stole him from me using forged documents and bribed witnesses. I could not leave him in that house, being raised by the absolute monsters who destroyed my life. Why didn't you seek immediate legal counsel when the lockout happened? Because I didn't have a single dollar to my name. I didn't have an ID. I didn't have a phone. I had absolutely nothing. They literally took everything from me." Tears streamed freely down Chloe's face now. "I was sleeping on freezing concrete, Mr. Hayes. I was washing myself in filthy public park bathrooms. How exactly was I supposed to hire a lawyer?" ADA Hayes nodded slowly, tapping his pen. "I deeply sympathize with your horrific situation, but legally, that does not justify parental kidnapping." "With all due respect, Mr. Hayes," I suddenly interrupted, unable to hold my tongue. "It is not kidnapping when a desperate mother snatches her own child out of the hands of violent abusers. He looked up at me, clearly surprised by the outburst. Attorney Sterling shot me a warning look to keep my mouth shut, but the prosecutor held up his hand to stop her. "And you are?" "I am her mother, Eleanor. I am the boy's grandmother. And I am the person who deposited over $72,000 into my daughter's account over the last 3 years, money that was flat out stolen by her wealthy ex-husband's family. $72,000? $2,000 on the first of every month for 3 straight years. I shoved my own pristine bank statements across his desk, transfers made religiously. My daughter never saw a single dime of that money because her abusive husband controlled her accounts like a dictator. Ada Hayes took my bank statements and cross-referenced them with the files with intense focus. I saw his jaw tighten as he did the math in his head. "This constitutes wire fraud on a massive scale," he murmured to himself. "It is a massive federal crime," Attorney Sterling pounced. "And we have the receipts. The elite private investigator I retained has already traced a huge chunk of those exact funds. The stolen money was blatantly used to renovate luxury properties owned by the Almazan family, purchase high-end vehicles, and inflate their corporate accounts. Not a single cent went to the benefit of my client or her child." The prosecutor sat in heavy silence for a very long time. Finally, he let out a long breath. "I am going to be brutally honest with you all. This case is an absolute legal nightmare. We have extremely severe felony accusations flying from both sides. But the physical evidence you brought me today is deeply disturbing." He looked at Chloe. "Here is what I am willing to do. I will not request immediate pretrial detention under the strict condition that you agree to be released into your mother's direct custody until the emergency hearing. It will act as a form of house arrest, restricted entirely to the hotel where you are staying." "And my son?" Chloe gasped. "Temporary emergency custody will remain with you, heavily monitored by a court-appointed social worker, until a judge makes a definitive ruling on this mess." He turned his sharp gaze to Attorney Sterling. "But I want a full-scale, deep-dive criminal investigation into the Almazan family immediately. If even half of what you are alleging here is proven true, we are looking at massive, multi-year felony indictments." It felt like a 1,000-pound boulder had been lifted off my chest. Chloe broke down weeping, this time out of pure, unadulterated relief. I felt hot tears streaming down my own face. "Thank you, Mr. Hayes," I managed to choke out. "Thank you so much." "Do not thank me yet," he said, slamming the thick file shut. "This legal battle is going to be incredibly long and vicious. The Almazan family has unlimited resources and extremely aggressive lawyers. You need to be ready for a bloodbath." "We brought our own weapons," Attorney Sterling replied coldly on our behalf. "We walked out of that courthouse with Chloe officially in my legal custody and with emergency permission to keep Leo with her. It wasn't the final victory, but it was a massive first strike. When we got back to the hotel and Chloe scooped Leo up into a desperate hug, I saw something in her eyes that had been dead for a long time. Pure hope. That little boy was finally starting to understand that he wasn't going to be ripped away from his mommy again." Over the next 2 grueling weeks, Attorney Sterling worked like a woman possessed. She hired 2 more investigators. She secured ironclad subpoenas to rip open the Almazan family's sealed corporate bank accounts. She relentlessly hunted down witnesses. Every single day, we unearthed more absolute filth. Julian indeed had a much younger mistress, and he was actively planning a lavish wedding with her. He had actually used Chloe's stolen money to buy a luxury condo for the 2 of them. His mother, Patricia, had a horrific buried history of being sued by former maids for physical and emotional abuse. The father, Arthur, was already quietly under federal investigation for massive tax evasion. Their entire real estate empire was a house of cards built on shady deals. It was like opening Pandora's box of white-collar crime. 2 weeks after our meeting with the prosecutor, Attorney Sterling secured a high-stakes preliminary hearing to battle for permanent custody. We walked into the imposing courtroom with Chloe wearing a beautiful new dress I had bought her. Her hair was professionally styled, looking exactly like the dignified, fierce woman she had always been. Sitting smugly on the other side of the aisle was Julian, flanked by his wealthy parents and a team of expensive lawyers. When Julian locked eyes with me, his face twisted into a mask of pure, ugly rage. "You," he stood up, pointing a shaking finger directly at me. "You ruined everything. Your daughter is a psychotic, kidnapping lunatic. Sit down and shut your mouth, I fired back, my voice echoing off the wood panels. Or I will walk over there and slap you so hard your head will spin. The judge slammed her heavy wooden gavel. Order, everyone sit down immediately. The judge was a formidable woman in her 60s named Catherine Bennett. She had a terrifying reputation in the city for being ruthlessly strict but fair. She read over the massive case file with intense concentration before speaking. This is an incredibly disturbing and complex case, Judge Bennett began. We have extremely severe allegations coming from both tables. Aggravated domestic violence, massive financial fraud, parental abduction. We will begin by hearing opening arguments. The Almazan family's lead attorney, a slick, arrogant man named Cameron Vance, stood up first. He delivered a dramatic, theatrical speech about how Chloe was violently unstable, a severely negligent mother, and how she had criminally kidnapped her own son and dragged him into the gutter. This child was forced to live in squalor, in inhumane conditions. Attorney Vance boomed dramatically. Begging for change on street corners, sleeping on freezing concrete. What kind of monster does that to her own flesh and blood? The kind of mother who was illegally locked out and thrown onto the street without a single dime by your horrific clients. Attorney Sterling shot up from her chair. Are we going to discuss that, Mr. Vance? Are we going to discuss how your client, Julian Almazan, savagely beat my client for years? How his wealthy family systematically embezzled over $72,000 of her money? How they entirely fabricated psychiatric evaluations to steal a child? Those are baseless, hysterical accusations. I have the certified medical reports, high-resolution photographs, subpoenaed bank records, and sworn witnesses. Attorney Sterling slammed a massive, 3-inch thick binder onto the wooden table. Everything is documented. Everything is proven beyond a shadow of a doubt. Judge Bennett raised her hand, demanding silence. Attorney Sterling, present your evidence. And she did, one by one, meticulously and ruthlessly. She projected the photos of the horrific bruising still visible on Chloe's body onto the courtroom screens. She read from the forensic examiner's report detailing every single brutal injury. She displayed the bank statements, proving my monthly deposits and showing the exact digital transfers Julian made straight into his own private accounts. She presented sworn affidavits from terrified neighbors in Chloe's old luxury building, testifying that they heard blood-curdling screams and the sounds of brutal beatings through the walls. Then she called her live witnesses. The first was the Almazan family's former housekeeper, Helen, a tough woman in her 60s who had worked for them for 10 years before quitting in disgust. Helen, did you ever personally witness any instances of physical violence? Dozens of times. The older woman spoke directly into the microphone with a strong, clear voice. Julian beat Chloe like a dog. I saw the massive bruises. I heard her screaming for her life. Once, she was locked inside the master bedroom for 3 straight days because he shoved her down a flight of stairs. And was the family aware of this violence? Patricia knew absolutely everything. She used to tell me Chloe was just dramatic and that a strong husband had every right to put his wife in her place. Helen glared at the Almazan family with pure disgust. That entire family is rotten to the absolute core. Their slick lawyer tried desperately to destroy her credibility, claiming she was a disgruntled, fired employee looking for revenge. But Helen pulled out a worn notebook where she had meticulously documented every single date, time, and description of the abuse for years. "Why did you keep this detailed log, ma'am?" the judge asked, leaning forward. "Because I knew, deep in my soul, that one day this poor girl's truth would need to be told," Helen replied fiercely. That sweet girl suffered through hell. The grueling hearing dragged on for hours. Attorney Sterling paraded witness after witness to the stand. A neighbor who had watched Julian violently drag Chloe by her hair into a car in the parking garage. The clerk at a high-end makeup counter who testified Chloe constantly bought heavy concealer to hide black eyes. Even a yoga instructor who noticed the massive finger-shaped bruises on her arms. Every single testimony felt like a knife twisting in my heart. Hearing my daughter's hidden torture broadcast in a cold courtroom, knowing she endured all of that entirely alone while I was sitting oblivious in Des Moines, absolutely shattered me. The Almazan family's lawyers tried to fight back, but their witnesses were pathetic. wealthy family friends who admitted they never actually saw Chloe behind closed doors, real estate employees who recited clearly rehearsed, robotic lines. Then, Attorney Sterling dropped the absolute nuke. She called our private investigator to the stand, Jack Reynolds, a tough-looking former FBI agent who now ran the best PI firm in the city. Mr. Reynolds, did you conduct a deep-dive forensic investigation into the Almazan family's finances? I did. Over the last 2 weeks, my team tracked every single bank transfer and property deed tied to their names. And what exactly did you uncover? Jack opened his laptop and projected massive financial spreadsheets onto the courtroom wall. I discovered that over the last 3 years, exactly $82,000 was siphoned from the joint account of Julian and Chloe Almazan and transferred into private accounts controlled exclusively by the Almazan family. That money was not used for marital expenses. It was used to, he pointed a laser pointer at the screen, fund massive luxury renovations on 3 commercial properties owned by Arthur Almazan, purchase 2 luxury SUVs registered solely to Patricia Almazan, and put a massive down payment on a luxury condo registered to Julian, which is currently occupied by his girlfriend, Stella. The entire courtroom went dead silent. Julian turned the color of chalk. His mother stared at the floor, humiliated. Their lawyer practically jumped over the table. Objection! Your Honor, this has absolutely no relevance to a child custody hearing. It has every relevance. Attorney Sterling roared back. It proves a highly calculated, malicious pattern of financial abuse and manipulation. They systematically robbed my client blind and then walked into this courtroom claiming she lacks the financial stability to raise her own son. Judge Bennett stared hard at the damning spreadsheets. Mr. Vance, does your client have a legal explanation for these massive transfers? The lawyer furiously whispered with Julian before standing up. Those were mutual, verbal investment agreements made between the married couple. Where are the signed contracts? Where is the paperwork? Attorney Sterling mocked. Are you honestly claiming $80,000 was moved on a handshake? Judge Bennett raised a single eyebrow. That is highly improbable, Mr. Vance. But Attorney Sterling was not even close to finished. I would like to call Stella to the stand. A beautiful, terrified young woman in her mid-20s slowly stood up from the back of the gallery. She was shaking like a leaf. The opposing lawyer tried frantically to block it, but the judge overruled him instantly. Under oath, Stella tearfully confessed that she had been Julian's mistress for 2 years. She admitted he bought her the luxury condo 6 months ago. She admitted he promised to marry her the second he permanently got rid of his wife. And exactly how did he plan to get rid of his wife? Attorney Sterling pressed, circling like a shark. He bragged that he was going to hire people to prove she was insane and a terrible mother. He said he was going to take the kid and throw her on the street with absolutely nothing. Stella was openly sobbing now. I swear to God I didn't know he was beating her. He always told me she was the violent one, that he had to defend himself. But you were fully aware he was a married man when you started sleeping with him? Yes, but he swore the marriage had been completely dead for years. Attorney Sterling aggressively threw blown-up photos onto the evidence table pictures of Julian and Chloe smiling at fancy galas just 6 months before the lockout. Does this look like a completely dead marriage to you? Stella just shook her head, burying her face in her hands. When Stella finally stepped down, Julian was purple with absolute rage. He completely lost his mind, leaping to his feet and screaming at the top of his lungs. That stupid bitch is lying. I never said that. Mr. Almazan, control yourself immediately. Judge Bennett slammed her gavel so hard it echoed. But Julian was completely unhinged. This is all that old hag's fault, he screamed, pointing a trembling finger right at me. Filling Chloe's head with poison, turning my own wife against me. Chloe was a perfectly obedient wife until this witch showed up. That was the absolute last straw. I stood up from my chair, completely ignoring Attorney Sterling trying to grab my arm, and I took 2 steps toward Julian. He was much taller than me, much younger, much stronger. But I was possessed by the primal rage of a mother, and I feared absolutely nothing. Obedient? My voice thundered through the silent courtroom. You call a woman who gets beaten black and blue every single day obedient? A woman who sleeps in pure terror of her own husband? A woman you robbed of every single penny she had? You are a pathetic, Weak coward, Julian Almazan. A coward who beats women in the dark, steals from his own family, and then has the absolute nerve to stand in a courtroom and play the victim. "Ma'am, sit down right now," the judge commanded sharply. But I wasn't done. "My daughter is worth 1,000 of you. She gave you a beautiful son, she kept your home, she supported you, and you tried to destroy her soul. But guess what? You lost. Because I will fight you with every single drop of blood in my veins to make sure you never, ever lay a finger on her or my grandson again." 2 armed bailiffs quickly stepped forward to escort me back to my seat. I let them guide me, but I kept my eyes locked dead on Julian. I saw genuine fear in his eyes. Good. He should be terrified. Judge Bennett called for a strict 30-minute recess. Chloe threw her arms around me, shaking violently. "Mom, you shouldn't have done that. Someone needed to look that monster in the eye and tell him the truth." I wiped a tear from my own cheek. "I am done being quiet while he tries to destroy you." When the court finally reconvened, Judge Bennett's face was completely unreadable. "I have thoroughly reviewed all of the evidence presented here today. This is one of the most profoundly disturbing cases of abuse and manipulation I have witnessed in my 20 years on the bench." She turned her icy glare to Julian. "Mr. Almazan, the evidence against you is absolutely staggering. Documented, severe domestic violence, massive financial fraud, and the blatant weaponization of the judicial system using forged documents. Your conduct is reprehensible." Then she looked softly at Chloe. "Chloe, I fully understand that you acted out of sheer, terrified desperation when you took your son, but it still constitutes a severe violation of a prior court order." My heart completely stopped. Was she really going to take Leo away from her anyway? "However," the judge continued, "considering the extreme, exceptional circumstances, the horrific violence you endured, and the indisputable fact that the original custody order was obtained through perjury and fraud, I am ruling as follows." She adjusted her glasses. "Full, permanent legal and physical custody of Leo Almazan is immediately restored to the mother, Chloe Almazan. The father is stripped of all custody rights. He will be granted strictly supervised visitation once a week at the Family Court Supervised Visitation Center, pending the outcome of the criminal investigations." Chloe let out a loud, shuddering gasp of pure relief. "Furthermore, I am ordering Julian Almazan and his family to immediately restitute all embezzled funds to the petitioner, totaling exactly $82,000 under penalty of immediate asset seizure." "That is absolutely absurd," their lawyer shouted. "That is justice, Mr. Vance." Judge Bennett slammed her gavel. "I am also forwarding a full, unredacted copy of this court transcript and all submitted evidence directly to the district attorney's office, heavily recommending immediate grand jury indictments for aggravated domestic violence, grand larceny, perjury, and fraud." We are adjourned. When we walked out of those heavy courtroom doors, Chloe could barely even stand. She was crying so hard. They were tears of profound relief, of freedom, of justice finally being served. "We won, Mom. We actually won." "Not completely," Attorney Sterling reminded us gently, packing her briefcase. "The criminal trials are going to be brutal, and they will appeal the money, but we just cut the head off the snake today. I didn't care about the appeals. In that glorious moment, all that mattered was that Leo was officially safe with Chloe. The ugly truth was out in the light. The Almazan family had been publicly destroyed. We rushed back to the hotel and grabbed Leo. When Chloe knelt down and told him that he was never leaving her again, the little boy threw his arms around her neck and squeezed with all his might. "For always, Mommy? For always, my sweet boy." That night, we ordered massive pizzas and celebrated. It was a simple, quiet celebration, just the 3 of us in a hotel room, but it was absolute perfection. Leo was giggling, Chloe was beaming, and I finally felt like I had done exactly what a mother is supposed to do: protect her child from the wolves. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of rebuilding. Attorney Sterling legally forced the police to retrieve all of Chloe's stolen documents and personal items from the luxury apartment. With her ID finally back in her hands, we opened a brand new, secure bank account in her name only, where I immediately started depositing my monthly support checks. I also rented a beautiful, sunny, two-bedroom apartment in a very safe, quiet neighborhood in the suburbs. It wasn't a luxury high-rise, but it was ours. It was a fortress where Chloe and Leo could finally heal. Chloe was still incredibly fragile and jumpy. A door slamming made her flinch. She saw Julian's face in every tall man walking down the street. She woke up screaming from nightmares almost every single night. I gently suggested therapy, and she agreed. We found an incredible trauma psychologist, Dr. Sarah Jenkins. The sessions were grueling. Chloe would come home from every appointment with her eyes swollen from crying. But slowly, inch by inch, I saw the light coming back. She started walking with her head held high. She started making choices for herself without anxiously asking for my permission. Tiny, beautiful steps back to life. Leo desperately needed help too. 4 years in a violent, terrifying house, followed by a month on the brutal streets, had deeply scarred him. He was far too quiet, terrified of loud noises, and absolutely petrified of men. He started seeing a wonderful child psychologist named Dr. Emily Davis. Through specialized play therapy and drawing, Leo slowly began to process his trauma. He started acting like a real little boy again. He laughed louder. He threw normal tantrums when he didn't want to eat his broccoli, and he started asking a million questions a minute like a normal 4-year-old. I enrolled him in a wonderful local preschool. On his very first day, Chloe stood at the fence and wept as she watched him walk into the classroom with his little dinosaur backpack. They were tears of pure joy, seeing her son finally get to have a normal, safe childhood. Meanwhile, the criminal justice system was grinding the Almazan family into dust. The district attorney did not hold back. Julian was formally indicted on multiple felony charges of domestic violence, grand larceny, and perjury. His mother, Patricia, was indicted as a co-conspirator. His father, Arthur, was fighting a massive federal indictment for tax evasion and money laundering that the investigators uncovered. It turned out their entire real estate empire was a massive criminal enterprise. Their fancy lawyers tried to buy their way out. They offered to pay back double the stolen money if Chloe dropped the criminal charges. Attorney Sterling literally laughed in their faces. "They think their money makes them gods," she told us. "We are going to burn them to the ground." Julian's supervised visits with Leo were an absolute train wreck. The poor boy would sob hysterically the second he saw his father's face. He would cling to Chloe's leg and refuse to go anywhere near the man. Julian would lose his temper, trying to force the boy to hug him, which only traumatized Leo further. After 3 disastrous attempts, Dr. Davis filed a blistering medical report demanding the visits be permanently suspended until the child was emotionally stable enough to handle it. The judge agreed immediately. Julian flew into a rage and tried to file a frivolous lawsuit claiming parental alienation. But with a mountain of psychiatric reports proving Leo's terror was a direct result of severe trauma, the judge threw it out instantly. 3 months after our initial victory, the stolen money was finally returned. It wasn't the full amount, because Attorney Sterling's fees and the PI costs took a chunk, but Chloe received a wire transfer for $60,000. It was more than enough to start completely over. She used a large portion of it to put a massive down payment on the apartment we were renting. She wanted total security. She wanted a home with her name on the deed that no man could ever take away from her. The rest went straight into a high-yield college fund for Leo. I started thinking it was time to go back to Des Moines. My entire life was there. My house, my friends, my routines. But every single time I gently brought it up, absolute panic would wash over Chloe's face. "Mom, please don't leave us yet. Please." How on earth could I leave? My daughter still needed her mother. My grandson was finally calling me grandma and would sprint into my arms every time I walked through the door. So, I made my choice. I sold my house in Iowa and bought a smaller, cozy condo in the exact same building as Chloe. I decided I would stay right there, practically next door, for as long as they needed me. Months turned into a year. Chloe landed a fantastic job at a prestigious accounting firm downtown. She started as a junior assistant, but she was brilliant with numbers. Within 6 months, she earned a massive promotion. I will never forget the fierce pride in her eyes when she deposited her very first real paycheck. Money that she earned with her own brain. Money that was entirely hers, that no man could ever touch. She took Leo out and bought him a whole new wardrobe and locked the rest in savings. Leo was absolutely thriving in preschool. He was whip-smart, incredibly curious, and obsessed with reading books. His teachers said he was so advanced they considered skipping him a grade, but Chloe refused. She wanted him to have a slow, normal, stress-free childhood. One crisp afternoon, almost exactly a year after I found my daughter begging on the street, we were sitting on a park bench watching Leo conquer the jungle gym. He was laughing, running, and playing tag with the other kids. A perfectly normal, deeply happy child. "Mom." Chloe reached over and grabbed my hand. "I don't think I ever properly thanked you." "Honey, you don't need to thank me for anything." "Yes, I really do. You saved my life. You literally saved Leo's life." Tears slipped down her smiling face. "If you hadn't shown up that morning, if you had given up on me when things looked impossible, I honestly don't know if we would have survived the winter. I would never, ever give up on you. You are my daughter." "I know," she squeezed my hand, "and that is exactly why you are the greatest mother in the world." She leaned over and hugged me tight. "I love you so much. I love you too, my sweet girl." We just sat there, wrapped in a hug, watching Leo play in the sunshine. I thought about the insane twists and turns of life. Exactly 1 year ago, my daughter was starving on the freezing concrete. Now, she owned a home, had an incredible career, and was raising a joyful son. She had her life back. The criminal trial for Julian finally arrived. I held Chloe's hand tight as we walked into the courthouse. She was trembling slightly, but her jaw was set like stone. She had prepared a victim impact statement, ready to tell the world exactly what he did to her. When the prosecutor called her to the stand, Chloe stood up tall and stared Julian straight in the eyes. Her voice did not shake once. "For 3 agonizing years, I lived in pure terror. Terror of doing something wrong, of speaking too loudly, of breathing the wrong way. Because everything I did was an excuse for you to beat me. You broke me down piece by piece, Julian. You brainwashed me into believing I was worthless, that I was clinically insane, that no one would ever love me." Julian couldn't even look at her. He stared at the floor. "You stole my money. You completely stripped away my dignity. You very nearly stole my child. But do you know what you failed to steal? My will to survive. My will to fight back. And with my mother standing behind me, I beat you. You lost, Julian. You lost everything." The judge listened in absolute silence. The jury listened to the horrific testimonies, saw the gruesome photos, and read the damning financial reports. They deliberated for less than 3 hours. The verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. Julian was sentenced to 4 hard years in a state penitentiary for aggravated domestic battery and grand larceny. His mother, Patricia, was sentenced to 2 years for aiding and abetting. His father narrowly avoided a prison cell, but he was hit with catastrophic federal fines and permanently lost his real estate license, destroying the family empire overnight. It was justice. It didn't magically erase the years of torture, and it didn't heal the deep scars overnight, but it was justice. 2 peaceful years passed since that day in the courtroom. Leo was now 6 years old and crushing it in 1st grade. Chloe had been promoted to a senior management role at her accounting firm. She was making excellent money, more than enough to give them a beautiful life. I was still living right next door, but Chloe was fiercely independent now. She didn't need me to fix her life anymore. She still came to me for advice or for a babysitter, but the dynamic had shifted. She was a strong, capable woman asking her mother for a favor, not a shattered victim needing to be rescued. Leo called me Grandma with absolute joy. Every single weekend, he had a sleepover at my condo. We baked chocolate chip cookies and watched animated movies until we fell asleep on the couch. He would teach me the complicated games he learned at recess. He was my entire world, the absolute light of my life. Julian was eventually released on parole after serving 2 years for good behavior. He instantly hired a lawyer to try and force visitation with Leo, but the boy was 7 years old now, and the judge asked him what he wanted. Leo looked the judge in the eye and said he never wanted to see his father again. The judge respected the child's wishes. Julian was legally barred from contact. He would have to wait until Leo was an adult to see if the boy ever wanted a relationship. Chloe eventually started dating again. She met a wonderful gentleman named Ben, who worked as an architect in her office building. He knew her entire horrific backstory. He adored Leo, and he was endlessly patient with Chloe's lingering traumas. For the very first time in her life, I saw my daughter in a truly healthy, equal partnership. One evening, Chloe knocked on my door and sat down at my kitchen table, twisting a napkin nervously in her hands. "Mom, Ben asked me to marry him." My heart did a flip, not out of fear, but pure joy. "And what did you tell him?" I said yes. She smiled, but her eyes were anxious. "But I really need your honest opinion. Do you think I'm rushing things? We've only been together for a year." I looked at my beautiful daughter. She was a universe away from the broken skeleton I found shivering on the sidewalk. Her skin was glowing, her eyes were bright, and she carried herself with such power. "Honey, you are a grown woman. You know exactly what you want out of life now. And more importantly, you know exactly how to spot a good man. If you love him, and he treats you like a queen, you marry him. But what if my judgment is broken? What if I'm making another catastrophic mistake? Julian was a master manipulator. He isolated you and abused you. Ben is a completely different breed of man. I see the way he looks at you like you hung the moon. I see the way he plays with Leo. He is a genuinely good man." Chloe leaped up and threw her arms around me. "Thank you, Mom. Thank you for never, ever giving up on me." The wedding was small and breathtakingly beautiful, held in a little stone chapel with only our closest friends and Ben's lovely family. Leo was the ring bearer, looking incredibly handsome in his tiny tuxedo. Chloe was absolutely radiant in a simple, elegant white gown. When the pastor asked if anyone objected to the union, a ripple of laughter went through the pews because everyone in that room knew nobody would dare object while I was sitting in the front row. The reception was a backyard barbecue at the beautiful new house Ben had bought for them, complete with a massive backyard and a swing set for Leo. I stood on the patio with a glass of wine, watching my daughter slow dance with her new husband, smiling a genuine, unbreakable smile. Leo came sprinting across the grass and crashed into my legs. "Grandma, I finally have a real dad now." "You sure do, my sweet boy. A dad who is going to love you and protect you forever." "Are you still going to be my grandma, though?" "Always and forever, kiddo. Always." Life settled into a beautiful, boring, perfect routine. Chloe, Ben, and Leo were the picture of a happy family. I visited them constantly, babysat whenever they wanted a date night, and remained deeply involved in their lives. But I also finally started living my own life. I made a wonderful group of friends in my building, joined a lively book club, and finally took up the watercolor painting classes I always dreamed of. Things I never had a second for when I was a young widow raising Chloe all by myself. One random Tuesday, about 3 years after Chloe and Ben's wedding, I was walking down the aisle at the grocery store when I bumped carts with someone. It was Patricia, Julian's mother. She was shockingly thin, looking 10 years older than she was, her shoulders hunched in defeat. She looked absolutely nothing like the arrogant, diamond-draped monster I faced down in the courtroom. When she recognized me, her eyes blew wide open in sheer terror. "Eleanor," she rasped, "I could have been incredibly cruel. I could have completely destroyed her right there in the produce section. But I looked at this miserable, broken woman who had tried to ruin my family, and I felt absolutely nothing but pity." "Patricia," I said calmly, giving her a tight nod, and pushed my cart past her without another word. I didn't have any rage left. I didn't have any hate. Those people had tried their absolute best to destroy my daughter, and they came incredibly close, but they failed spectacularly. And now they had to live in the miserable ruins of their own making, while we were busy living a beautiful life. Leo grew up strong, brilliant, and kind. By the time he was 10 years old, he was an honor roll student with big dreams. He wanted to be a veterinarian because he had a fiercely protective love for animals. Ben supported him in every single endeavor, cheering the loudest at his soccer games. Chloe's career exploded. She eventually left the firm and opened her own highly successful accounting consultancy. She finally achieved the total financial independence and power she always deserved. And me? I had my wonderful daughter back. I had a grandson who thought I was a superhero. I had the profound, quiet peace of knowing that I did the exact right thing on that freezing January morning. I could have been scared. I could have run back to Iowa and avoided the war. I could have believed the vicious lies the Almazan family spun, but I didn't. I fought like hell. I spent every last dime I had to my name, and I used every ounce of strength in my aging bones to pull my daughter out of the fire. And it was worth it. Every terrifying moment, every grueling court date, every sleepless, panic-stricken night, it was all worth it. Today, 5 years after I stepped off that Greyhound bus, I am sitting in a comfortable lawn chair in Chloe's sprawling backyard, watching a 12-year-old Leo gently pushing his twin baby sisters on the swings. Chloe and Ben had twin girls last year, Harper and Lily. Leo is the most incredible big brother on the planet. He plays with them for hours, helps Ben change their diapers, and reads them bedtime stories every single night. He is a deeply kind, loving young man. Chloe is actually pregnant again. We just found out last week it's another boy. Ben is absolutely over the moon. I am too. Another precious grandchild to spoil rotten. Life gave us the ultimate second chance. Chloe got the chance to rebuild from the ashes, to find true love, to be a mother without living in terror. Leo got the chance to grow up in a house overflowing with laughter and safety, and I got the chance to be the matriarch I always promised myself I would be. Sometimes, when the house is quiet, I think about what would have happened if I hadn't decided to plan that silly surprise birthday trip. If I had just called to say I was visiting, or if the taxi driver hadn't stopped at that exact grocery store at that exact red light, I never would have uncovered the nightmare. My daughter would have continued to suffer in silence. Or far worse, she might have frozen to death on those brutal streets. Leo would have been raised by those sociopaths, and I would have lived the rest of my life completely blind, sending $2,000 a month into a black hole, believing everything was fine. But fate had a completely different plan. Fate made sure I saw her. Fate made sure I knew the truth. And fate gave me the iron will to tear down the people hurting my family. "Grandma," Leo yells across the yard. "Come play with us." I push myself out of the lawn chair, my knees popping in protest. I am 72 years old now, definitely not as fast as I used to be, but I can still chase my grandkids around the grass. Chloe walks out onto the back patio carrying a pitcher of fresh lemonade. "Mom, don't push yourself too hard. The doctor told you to take it easy on your joints." "I'm perfectly fine, honey. Just going to play for a minute." "You always say that, and then you spend 3 days complaining about your sciatica," she laughs. I smile to myself. My daughter is the one aggressively taking care of me now. It is funny how life comes full circle. Ben walks out the back door, still in his work clothes, and wraps his arms around Chloe from behind, burying his face in her neck. She throws her head back and laughs, a loud, totally uninhibited, joyful sound. It took years of therapy and healing to hear that specific laugh again. "Daddy." The twins abandon the swings and waddle as fast as their little legs can carry them. "My beautiful princesses." Ben drops to his knees and scoops them both up, one in each arm. Leo jogs over to me. He is almost as tall as I am now, shooting up like a weed. "Grandma, can I ask you something serious? Anything in the world, kiddo. Do you ever regret selling your house and leaving Iowa to stay here with us?" The question catches me completely off guard. Why on earth would you ask that? Because you had your whole life there, your friends, your big house. You gave up literally everything just to come save Mom and me. I reach up and cup his handsome, freckled face in my hands. "Leo, listen to me very carefully. I didn't give up anything. I won the lottery. I got you back. I got your beautiful sisters. I got a real loving family. How could I ever regret a single second of that? But you were all alone. Not anymore. I have all of you, and you guys are absolutely everything I will ever need in this life." Leo wraps his long arms around me and squeezes me tight. "I love you, Grandma. You're the coolest grandma in the whole world. I love you too, my sweet boy, more than anything." Later that night, after Ben puts the kids to bed and the house goes completely quiet, I sit out on Chloe's back porch with a cup of tea, just staring up at the stars. I think about the absolute hell we walked through, from the freezing, filthy sidewalks of downtown Chicago to this beautiful, peaceful backyard. It was a brutal, agonizing war. There were dark days when I honestly thought we were going to lose, days when the panic almost swallowed us whole. But we absolutely refused to surrender. We fought back with everything we had, and we won. My daughter is no longer that terrified, broken girl sitting on a piece of cardboard. She is a fierce, brilliant, fiercely independent woman. My grandson is a joyful, healthy young man with a blindingly bright future. And me? I am just a very happy grandmother, a fiercely proud mother, a woman who did exactly what had to be done and who doesn't regret a single damn thing. I still have nightmares sometimes. I still see Chloe shivering on that sidewalk, starving, filthy, and entirely broken. I wake up in my condo drenched in a cold sweat, my heart hammering against my ribs. But when that happens, I get out of bed. I walk quietly down the hall to Chloe and Ben's room. I peek through the crack in the door and watch my daughter sleeping soundly, safely wrapped in her loving husband's arms. And I can finally breathe again, because the nightmare is permanently over. We are living the dream now. Chloe confessed to me once that she felt deeply ashamed of what happened to her. She felt ashamed that she was weak, that she let Julian manipulate her so completely that she ended up begging on the streets. I grabbed her shoulders and told her she had absolutely nothing to be ashamed of. She was a victim of calculated, malicious predators. She was systematically isolated, violently abused, and financially ruined by pure evil. But she survived it. She fought her way out. She won. "You are the strongest person I have ever met in my entire life," I told her. "Stronger than me, stronger than your father, stronger than anyone, because you walked barefoot through hell and came out the other side. When I look at my daughter today, I don't see a victim. I see a survivor. I see an absolute warrior. I see a woman who looked pure evil in the face, endured the absolute worst humanity has to offer, and still actively chose to live, chose to love, and chose to be happy. And I thank God every single day that I was given the chance to be her shield, to be there on the darkest day of her life when she needed me the most, to stand shoulder to shoulder with her in the trenches, because at the end of the day, that is exactly what family does. Family does not abandon you. Family does not surrender. Family fights. Even when the lawyers say it's impossible, even when the world looks at you with disgust, family fights back. We fought, and we won. The soft sliding of the glass patio door pulls me out of my memories. It's Chloe, wrapped in a fluffy robe, her 6-month baby bump proudly leading the way. "Can't sleep, Mom?" "Just thinking." She sinks into the patio chair next to me and pulls her knees up. "What are you thinking about?" "Everything. About the long, crazy road that brought us here." Chloe reaches over and takes my hand in hers. "We only got here because you absolutely refused to give up on me. When the lawyers believed the lies, you believed in me. When I was completely ready to lay down and die, you grabbed me by the collar and gave me the strength to keep breathing. You are my daughter. I will always believe in you. I know. And that is exactly why you are my ultimate hero." Chloe rests her head gently on my shoulder. "When I grow up, I want to be exactly like you." I let out a soft laugh. "Honey, you're already grown up, and you are already 1,000 times better than me." Impossible. We sit there in the cool night air, just mother and daughter, looking up at the endless sky, 2 survivors, 2 warriors, 2 women who walked through the absolute darkest fires of hell and came out victorious. Life is not easy, and it is rarely fair. Sometimes, truly evil people do horrific things to good people, but there is always, always a shred of hope. There is always a way out of the darkness. There is always someone out there willing to fight for you. I was that person for Chloe. And if God told me I had to go back in time and do the whole horrific ordeal over again, I would do it in a heartbeat. I would drain every bank account. I would fight every legal battle. I would face down every single terror. Because she is worth it. Leo is worth it. This beautiful, loud, chaotic family we built from the ashes is worth it. And when my time finally comes to leave this earth, I will close my eyes in absolute peace, knowing exactly what I left behind. Not a legacy of money or real estate, but a legacy of fierce, uncompromising love. A legacy of fighting for the people who matter, and never, ever giving up on them. That is my legacy, and I couldn't possibly ask for anything better. Now, if this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and let me know down in the comments what part of this journey left you absolutely speechless. Oh, and don't forget to become a channel member to get exclusive access to stories I don't post anywhere else. I will see you over there.